Margaret Sullivan, a 70-year-old matriarch who built her empire from nothing, watches her carefully crafted legacy threatened when her grandson rushes into marriage with a woman she instinctively distrusts. In Chicago's opulent Sullivan Manor, a deadly game of deception unfolds as the bride's connection to a mysterious nightclub owner begins to surface. As a hasty divorce filing threatens everything the Sullivans have built, Margaret proves that enemies who underestimate a survivor like her do so at their own peril. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The Warning Signs. When you've lived for 70 years and built an empire from nothing but dirt and determination, you develop a sixth sense for danger. I felt it like a cold knife between my shoulder blades the moment my grandson Jackson told me he was getting married after just 8 weeks of knowing her. Amelia Pierce, a name that rolled off the tongue like honey, with a smile that could charm angels. But I, Margaret Sullivan, didn't build the Sullivan fortune by being charmed. I built it by seeing what others missed. And something about this girl wasn't right. Call it intuition, call it experience. But I knew, watching her perfect fingers curl possessively around my grandson's arm at their engagement party, that she wasn't after his heart. She was after everything else. "Grandma Maggie, isn't she wonderful?" Jackson beamed, his face glowing with that special radiance only a 22-year-old in love can possess, his eyes bright with hope and blind adoration. I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. She certainly is something. The engagement party was held at Sullivan Manor, of course. The crown jewel of everything I'd built with bloody knuckles and sleepless nights. A place where I made damn sure the marble floors were polished enough to see your reflection, where crystal chandeliers told stories of triumph and survival. I stood by the grand staircase, watching guests arrive in their designer shoes and carefully practiced smiles. Then she walked in, Amelia Pierce with her cascade of golden hair, porcelain skin and eyes green as emeralds. The kind of beauty that makes heads turn and wallets open. She glided toward me, her smile wide and mechanical like a doll wound too tight.
"Oh, Mrs.
"Sullivan," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Such an honor to finally meet you. Your home is breathtaking." I took her hand. It was cold, like touching marble. "Thank you, dear. Been in the family for 3 generations now. Planning to keep it that way." She didn't miss my meaning, her smile tightening just a fraction. Her eyes darted around the room, assessing, calculating. I'd seen that look before, the look of someone taking inventory. Everything about Amelia was polished to perfection, yet something in her manner felt rehearsed. Each answer clipped short, every glance tinged with the faintest hint of impatience. To her, I wasn't a person, I was an obstacle. Something to be tolerated until she could move past. My daughter Catherine fluttered around Amelia like a hummingbird, desperate to make her feel welcome. "Mum, isn't Amelia just perfect for Jackson?" she whispered when they slipped away to admire some family photos. I sipped my whiskey neat. "Nobody's perfect, Cathy, especially those who appear to be." The evening wore on with speeches and champagne toasts, but my unease only grew. Then I met him, Gerald Pierce, Amelia's father. You could hear him before you saw him. A booming laugh, words spilling out like water from a broken dam. He barreled toward me, grabbing my hand in both of his sweaty palms. "Margaret! The legendary Margaret Sullivan! What an absolute pleasure!" His teeth gleamed unnaturally white under the chandelier light. "I've heard so much about you. A female titan of industry. We need more women like you. Trailblazers? Visionaries?" I nodded, unmoved by his flattery. Gerald talked fast and loud about business ventures and opportunities, about how he respected strong women like me. I'd met 100 Geralds in my lifetime. Men who spoke loudly to hide empty pockets. Men who charmed rooms while plotting to steal them. The stink of desperation cloaked in expensive cologne and fake confidence. As the night progressed, I kept my distance, observing. It was then I spotted them. Amelia and a young man I didn't recognize, standing in the far corner of the ballroom away from the music and laughter. He wasn't just another guest or casual friend. There was electricity between them. The way they stood too close. The way she laughed with her whole body. The way his hand grazed her waist with a familiarity you don't develop in passing. I watched them unnoticed. Watched as Amelia's eyes lit up in a way they never did with Jackson. Watched as the young man, Ryan, I heard someone call him, leaned in and she leaned right back as if pulled by gravity. No one else noticed. The music was too loud, the drinks flowing too freely. But I saw it all. When you've fought for everything you have, when you've clawed your way out of poverty, you learn to recognize a snake no matter how pretty its skin. I stood there, champagne flute in hand, my face a perfect mask of composure. Inside, though, I made a silent vow. I would remember every glance, every whisper, every lie that smile tried to hide. Because storms don't announce themselves with thunder right away. Sometimes they creep in silently, and this one had just begun. The days leading up to the wedding felt like watching a train barreling toward a washed-out bridge. Everything was moving too fast, yet somehow nothing felt right. Jackson came to me one evening looking nervous. He sat on the edge of the leather sofa in my study, twisting his fingers together. "Grandma, I need your help," he said, his voice faltering. I set my book down, feeling the weight of his words. "What is it, Jackson?" He shifted uncomfortably. I bought Amelia's wedding dress, but I don't have enough money to cover it all right now. I put it on my credit card, but I'm a little short. Could you lend me some money?" I felt the familiar ache of disappointment. This wasn't Jackson talking. This was Amelia's influence. My grandson had never been reckless with money before. "No, Jackson," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "A gift is not an obligation. Respect comes before money. You should have thought about that before you bought that dress." He blinked, eyes wide with disbelief. "What do you mean?" "It's for Amelia's wedding dress, Grandma." "I know what it's for," I cut him off. "But you should never spend money you don't have, especially not for someone who hasn't earned your trust." His face flushed with frustration, and for a moment I saw a flicker of anger in his eyes. But he didn't argue. Instead, he stood up and in a quiet voice said, "I'll figure it out, Grandma." Then he left. The next morning, Catherine stormed into my study, her face tight with fury. "You had no right!" she spat, her voice sharp as a blade. "Jackson is doing what he thinks is best, and you—" She stopped, shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't believe you do this to him." I said nothing, watching her pace back and forth. "Do you even care about him?" she demanded. "Or are you too busy pretending you have all the answers? You're pushing him away, Mum." I felt the old ache in my chest, the pain of being misunderstood. But I didn't regret what I'd said. Jackson needed to learn that life wasn't just about rushing forward with promises and expensive dresses. It was about understanding the weight of those promises. Catherine, in her anger, couldn't see it. She was too busy playing the protective mother, defending her precious son. "Fine," she finally snapped. "I'll pay for it. I'll take care of everything. But don't think for a second that this doesn't change things between us." Just like that, lines were drawn. She paid for the dress that very day, in full, without a second thought. But I knew then that things would never be the same between us. Once you see someone's true nature, it doesn't go away. Jackson didn't speak to me about it again. He didn't ask for my advice or approval. He simply let his mother handle it, not realizing what had been lost in the exchange. And Catherine couldn't see past her anger long enough to realize I wasn't trying to hurt her son. I was trying to teach him. The wedding drew closer with each passing day, and I could feel the distance between us growing. Jackson, lost in his own world of wedding plans and Amelia's demands, didn't notice. But I did. And I knew something dark and quiet that they didn't. There was more to Amelia's story than met the eye. I could feel it deep in my bones. The signs were all around us, but for now, I stayed silent. Sometimes, it's better to let them fall on their own before you make them see the truth. Chapter 2. Beneath the Surface. The day of the wedding arrived with all the fanfare befitting the Sullivan name. A grand event, a spectacle meant to be remembered. Flowers, gourmet food, laughter, everything wrapped in layers of luxury. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of Jackson's life. But beneath the glittering surface, the air was thick with tension. I stood in the corner of the ballroom, watching as guests gathered, their laughter floating over the sound of clinking champagne glasses. The venue shimmered with gold accents, the light soft and warm, just as it should be for such an important occasion. Yet something felt off. Amelia was a vision in her wedding dress, every inch of her crafted to perfection. Her beauty was undeniable, but her eyes never met mine. She looked past me as though I were invisible, or worse, as though I were a ghost from her past that she had no time for. I watched her move from one group of guests to another, her smile always tight, her words polite but lacking any true warmth. She almost seemed to avoid my gaze. and I didn't miss the coldness in her demeanor when she did glance my way. A flash of ice that disappeared as quickly as it came. Jackson stood beside her, a gleam in his eye that only a young man in love could have. I wanted to reach out and shake him, to make him see what I saw, but he was too deep in it, too blinded by the illusion of love to notice the cracks. Gerald Pierce was the picture of charm. His laugh was loud, his words fast and smooth, designed to fill any silence. He walked through the crowd like a king, grasping hands, shaking shoulders, and making promises to anyone who would listen about his great new ventures and amazing opportunities. I could feel his desperation from across the room, the way he sought approval from anyone who might help him claw his way up the social ladder. The kind of man who could tell you anything and make you believe it with a smile. The kind of man I'd learned to distrust long ago. But it wasn't just Gerald that caught my eye that evening. It was Ryan. He stood with Amelia for most of the night, casually, as if he belonged there. His easy laughter and the way he leaned in just a bit too close when he spoke to her wasn't something you could miss, if you were looking. And I was always looking. They shared quiet jokes, exchanged knowing looks, and moved as if they had always belonged to each other. Amelia's eyes softened when she looked at him, something I hadn't seen when she looked at Jackson. The affection in their eyes was unmistakable, and the way their bodies almost seemed to align naturally, like magnets, made my stomach twist. I watched them like a hawk, marking every small gesture, every touch that was just a beat too lingering, every laugh that went on a second too long. I wasn't the only one who saw it, I was sure of it, but no one dared to say anything. Not while everything was glittering so brightly. Not while Jackson was still lost in the haze of his wedding day. Not while Catherine hovered nearby with her fake smile, blissfully ignorant of the crack in the foundation beneath their feet. As I stood there, I felt the weight of years of experience pressing down on me, reminding me of the lies I'd encountered in my life. The kind that always seemed perfect on the surface, but I had been burned too many times to let it go unnoticed. Ryan wasn't just a friend. He wasn't just a familiar face in the crowd. He was something else, something more dangerous, and I could see it clearly. The evening stretched on and the formalities came and went. The speeches, the toasts, the forced joy. All of it was a performance, a game everyone was playing to keep up appearances. But I could see through it all. I recorded every detail, every subtle glance, every small inflection in voice that betrayed the calm surface. I would remember it all. Amelia's coldness, Gerald's desperate smiles, Ryan's intimate proximity. I would remember because one day, sooner than they thought, everything they had built would come crashing down. And when it did, I'd be the one watching from the sidelines, calm as ever, knowing that I had seen it coming long before anyone else did. It's funny how life has a way of moving forward even when you're stuck in the past. Jackson had barely been married for a few weeks when he sat me down, eyes wide with excitement, and started talking about his big break. "Grandma, I've got the perfect opportunity," he said, practically glowing. I tried to focus, listening as he spoke, but the voice inside my head, the one that never stopped warning me, was already starting to whisper. It wasn't even the tone of his voice or the sparkle in his eyes that bothered me. It was the way he said it, the way he believed it. Like every word was the gospel truth, like nothing could go wrong. "Gerald, he's been teaching me about investments, and we're going to do this through Apex Investments. It's a game changer, Grandma. I'm going to make some serious money." I nodded, letting him spill out his excitement, but inside my stomach churned. Apex Investments. The name itself felt hollow to me, like something designed to sound more impressive than it really was. Gerald Pierce, the smooth talker I'd seen at the wedding, was now guiding my grandson into a world I knew nothing about, and my gut told me it wasn't the path he thought it was. "Sounds interesting," I said, forcing my lips into a polite smile. "But tell me more about this opportunity," Jackson went on, detailing every aspect of his plan as if the very mention of the words business and investment had transformed him into a savvy professional. I listened, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my chest. The whole thing felt too perfect. Gerald Pierce, a man with more flash than substance, suddenly becoming Jackson's mentor. A supposed opportunity to make money when we both knew how quickly that world could swallow you whole. It was as if he had placed Jackson under his spell, making him believe that wealth and success could be snatched up with a single leap of faith. The more Jackson spoke, the more I realized how much he trusted Gerald, how much he wanted to believe in this so-called opportunity. And I couldn't help but wonder, was this another one of Gerald's schemes? Was this just another way for him to ingratiate himself with the Sullivan name, to slide his way into the family's pockets? Well, you know I've always trusted you, Jackson, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. But you should be careful. Sometimes the fastest way to success is the fastest way to disaster. He waved it off like I was just another old woman trying to slow him down. You don't have to worry, Grandma. Gerald's a genius when it comes to investments. I'm going to learn a lot, and we're going to build something big. I smiled again, but this time it wasn't a smile of encouragement. It was the kind of smile a person gives when they know something others don't. I had seen too many people like Gerald in my life, the ones who promised you the moon while they were digging a hole underneath you. And Jackson, in his youthful optimism, was heading straight for that hole, completely unaware of the danger beneath his feet. All right, I said softly. But just remember, Jackson, not every opportunity is what it seems. I saw his eyes flicker with impatience, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stood up, ruffling my hair as he always had when he was a little boy. I'll be fine, Grandma. Trust me. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sat there, feeling the weight of his words press down on me. I wasn't sure if it was Gerald's influence or the dream of easy success that had clouded Jackson's judgment. But either way, I knew trouble was on the horizon. It always starts with something too good to be true, doesn't it? And this opportunity Jackson was so excited about, it felt too perfect. I had learned long ago that perfect was just another word for disaster waiting to happen. Chapter 3, The Unraveling. It's strange how people ignore the signs when they don't want to see them. How they convince themselves that everything is fine when deep down they know something isn't right. As the weeks passed, I watched Jackson's behavior shift slowly, like the tide creeping in, unnoticed until it's too late. He started selling off assets. Those gifts I had given him over the years, things that had been meant to secure his future, to ensure that he would never have to struggle the way I did. At first, I thought it was just a momentary lapse, a misstep. But it wasn't. Grandma, I'm just reinvesting, he would say, his voice upbeat, his eyes bright with that same enthusiasm he'd had when he first told me about Apex investments. It's all part of the plan. These are just new projects Gerald's helping me with. I'm going to make it all back and more. Every time he spoke like that, something inside me turned cold. The words were the same ones I had heard from too many people who'd lost everything, who had been seduced by someone promising them the world and leaving them with nothing but empty hands. The first time he sold a piece of property, a small investment I had given him for his 21st birthday, he tried to reassure me, but I could see it in his eyes. He was scared. Scared of failing, scared of disappointing Gerald, and scared of me. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I wouldn't care. But I noticed, and I cared. One evening, after another of Jackson's "I'm just adjusting things" explanations, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with Catherine, trying to make her understand what was happening, trying to get her to see the way Gerald was pulling the strings. But she didn't want to hear it. "Mom, you're being ridiculous," she said, rolling her eyes in that way she always did when she thought I was being too harsh. Jackson is grown now. He's making decisions for himself. You need to let him live his life. I sighed, rubbing my temples, trying to gather the patience I had so often lost when dealing with her. I know my grandson Catherine, and I know men like Gerald Pierce. He's using Jackson, setting him up for something. He's a smooth talker, a con man, and you're too blind to see it. Her face flushed, and she crossed her arms defensively. Don't you dare call Gerald a con man, Mom. You don't know him like we do. Then what do you think this is? I snapped. This selling off his assets, this reinvesting in God knows what? Do you honestly think he's doing this for Jackson's future? But Catherine, like always, had her mind made up. You're just jealous. You're jealous of what Jackson's doing. You've never liked Gerald, and now you're blaming him for everything. She stood up, shaking her head, the conversation over in her mind. But I wasn't done. I looked at her, steady and calm, though the rage was bubbling just under the surface. I'm not jealous, Catherine. I'm scared. And you should be too. 'Cause I've seen this before. I've seen men like Gerald ruin people, and now they're doing it to my family, to my grandson. But she wouldn't listen. And Jackson, he was too wrapped up in his own world of promises and false hope to see what was right in front of him. Weeks passed, and with each passing day, I watched more pieces of Jackson's life slip away. He justified everything, selling off investments, emptying out savings, all in the name of growth and opportunity. The more he trusted Gerald, the more he lost himself. And the more I watched, the more I felt like I was losing him too. I tried once more late one night when Jackson came to visit after one of his meetings with Gerald. "Jackson, please listen to me," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You need to stop. This isn't the way." "Gerald!" He cut me off, eyes wide with frustration. "Grandma, I know what I'm doing. I'm not some kid anymore. I've got a plan. I'm taking control of my future." "You're being controlled, Jackson," I whispered. "And you don't even see it." But he didn't hear me. He couldn't. And I knew, deep down, that there was nothing more I could say. I was tired of warning them. Tired of shouting into the void, hoping someone would listen. No one wanted to hear the truth. Not Catherine. Not Jackson. So I decided to wait. I would wait for the truth to find its way to the surface. Because it always did. The lies always catch up. And when they did, I would be there, watching from the sidelines, ready to see how the story unfolded. And in that silence, I knew one thing for certain. The truth was coming. I just had to be patient. 3 months. Just 3 months. That was how long it took for the perfect illusion to crumble. I had seen it coming, of course. I had felt it in my bones even before Jackson had started selling his assets and handing his trust over to Gerald Pierce. But it didn't make it any easier when the reality of it hit. The phone call came late one evening, just as the sun was sinking behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate. Jackson was sitting in the study going over some documents, his face lit by the glow of the desk lamp. He looked up when I picked up the phone, his curiosity piqued. I didn't speak at first. I just listened. It was Catherine on the other end, and her voice was tight, strained. "Mom, you need to sit down. Amelia. She's filed for divorce." I felt the world pause for a moment. The air seemed to thicken, the weight of the news pressing down on me. Amelia, Jackson's new wife. 3 months. Not even long enough for a proper season to change. I stayed silent, my eyes locking with Jackson's. His confusion, his disbelief painted across his face. "What are you talking about?" Jackson's voice cracked, and I saw the panic begin to creep into his eyes. "She says it's incompatibility, Jackson." Catherine's voice was distant, but I could hear the underlying bitterness. "And she says she wants a separation of assets, including your shares in the Sullivan company." The words cut through me like a knife. Amelia hadn't just left him. She was taking everything she could with her, and she had the audacity to do it under the guise of a simple divorce. I stood there, my mind racing, piecing the puzzle together. 3 months was nothing. That was no time at all. Not enough time to really know someone, let alone end up with a divorce. But that was the plan, wasn't it? To worm her way in, to charm him, to make him fall and then pull the rug out from under him when she had everything in her grasp. She had never been in it for love. She'd been in it for the power, for the access to the Sullivan name. I could feel the trap close around me, around all of us. Jackson tried to speak again, but his words were all jumbled. She can't be serious, right? She can't just... But I had seen this story unfold too many times. I had heard the same words, felt the same heartbreak, watched the same naive optimism fall apart. Amelia had never cared about him. She had never cared about the family, about anything but what she could get. I waited a few more seconds, watching the confusion flood his face. Then I made my decision. "Jackson," I said quietly, my voice firm. "There's something you need to know." He looked at me, his eyes searching for some sort of answer, some kind of comfort. "Amelia has a plan." "She's been using you from the start," he recoiled, the words striking him harder than I expected. "Grandma, no, that's not..." "I'm not finished," I cut him off. "You're not seeing it." "She's been working with Gerald and Ryan. They've been pulling the strings, and you've been too blinded by love to see it." His face hardened, the anger replacing confusion. But it was too late. The truth was already out. "She's asking for everything, Jackson. Your shares, the money, everything. And it won't stop there. They'll keep coming for more." He didn't respond. He didn't have the words, but I could see the hurt settling in his eyes, the realization of everything I'd been warning him about finally sinking in. I turned away, my heart heavy but resolute. "This isn't over," I muttered to myself. "Not yet. Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to our story. Chapter 4. The Counterattack. Within the next few days, I took action. I couldn't wait for Jackson to figure it out on his own, not after all the warning signs I'd seen. I hired an investigator, someone who specialized in digging through the dirt and uncovering the truth no one wanted to face. I told the investigator to leave no stone unturned. I needed to know everything about Amelia, Gerald, and their circle. Where they had come from, what they'd been hiding. I needed to know if there was more. If they were working together, or if Amelia had been playing Jackson from the very beginning. It didn't take long for the investigator to find what I already knew in my gut. Amelia's financial history was a mess. Liens, debts, shady dealings, everything I'd suspected. And Gerald, the so-called golden boy of the business world. He wasn't much better. There were whispers of fraudulent deals, bankruptcies, and shady investments linked to his name. I felt the anger burn inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that they had thought they could get away with it. That they had used my grandson as a pawn to further their own selfish needs. But now I had them. I had everything I needed to bring them down. The trap was set, and now it was time for them to feel the consequences of their actions. I had no more patience for waiting. It was time to fight back. The pieces started to fall into place faster than I could have imagined. Once the investigator I hired dug into the finances of the Pierce family, it became clear that their polished facade was nothing more than a brittle shell, ready to shatter with the slightest pressure. The Pierce family was financially destroyed, and I mean destroyed. Their debts were staggering. Mortgages overdue, businesses in jeopardy, judgments piling up like an avalanche ready to bury them all. Amelia, it seemed, wasn't the only one with a history of poor financial decisions. Her father, Gerald, had been living a life of expensive illusions, buying into the image of success while neglecting the reality of his bankrupt empire. The investigator didn't stop there, of course. The more he dug, the more unsettling the story became. He found court records detailing lawsuits, liens, and unpaid loans stretching across the last decade. It was as if the Pierces had been running from creditors their entire lives, barely keeping ahead of the tide of their own making. But it wasn't just their money problems that caught my attention. It was something deeper. The connection between Amelia and Ryan began to form clearer lines. I had noticed Ryan during the wedding, of course. He was that charming, almost invisible figure who blended into the background while always staying just a bit too close to Amelia. A family friend, they had called him, but it didn't sit right with me. His behavior, his proximity to Amelia, there was more to their relationship than just friendship. I had felt it in my gut the entire time. The investigator, digging through their connections, began to make the same conclusions. Ryan wasn't just a friend. He had deeper ties to Amelia than anyone had realized. The more the detective uncovered, the clearer it became that Ryan had been part of a plan. And that plan wasn't about love. It was about something much more sinister. A few weeks into the investigation, the detective discovered that Ryan was the owner of a nightclub. Not just any place. It was a high-end establishment in a wealthy Chicago neighborhood that catered to the rich and the reckless. The kind of place where the wealthy would come to indulge their darkest desires, paying for privacy and secrecy. This was the moment when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It made perfect sense now. Ryan wasn't just hanging around, offering Amelia a shoulder to lean on. He was working with her. He was working with Gerald. And together, they were building a network of deceit and manipulation that went far beyond the simple marriage to Jackson. They were using him as a pawn. I instructed the investigator to go deeper to look into Ryan's life. I needed to know how far back this web of lies went, what kind of dealings Ryan was involved in, and how it connected to Amelia. The investigator didn't waste any time. He made his way to the nightclub, using his connections to slip in unnoticed. He spent hours there, watching, listening, gathering information. He spoke with a few of the staff members, discreetly asking about Ryan's activities. It didn't take long before one of the employees, a low-level bartender who didn't realize he was being watched, let something slip. For a small fee, the bartender gave up something valuable, access to the security footage from the club. The investigator didn't waste a second. He arranged for the footage to be delivered to him. It arrived a few days later. A black and white reminder of the darkness that had been festering just under the surface of everything I had trusted. I watched the footage in silence. It was grainy, taken from the security cameras inside the club. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just a few figures moving in and out of frame, the typical scene of a busy nightclub. Then I saw them. Amelia and Ryan huddled in a private booth, their heads close together, their hands intertwined on the table. They weren't just talking, they were plotting. And they weren't alone. Gerald was there too, leaning in, his expression serious, his hands gesturing wildly as if explaining something of great importance. But what struck me the most was the date on the footage. 2 weeks before Jackson had even met Amelia. 2 weeks before she had entered our lives with her perfect smile and her calculated charm. This wasn't a coincidence. This was planned. Every step, every smile, every sweet word whispered to Jackson. It was all part of a carefully orchestrated scheme to get their hands on the Sullivan fortune. I felt a strange sense of validation watching the footage, seeing the truth unfold before my eyes. I had known from the start that something wasn't right. I had felt it in my bones. But now I had proof. As the footage continued to roll, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Ryan pulled out a small package from his jacket pocket, sliding it across the table to Gerald, who quickly tucked it away. The investigator had been right to dig deeper. This wasn't just about a simple divorce and asset grab. There was something darker at play here, something that went beyond money. I watched the rest of the footage, my resolve hardening with each passing minute. By the time it ended, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The Pierces thought they were clever. They thought they could come into our lives, steal our money, and disappear without a trace. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated me. They didn't realize that I, Margaret Sullivan, had built an empire from nothing, that I had fought every step of the way to secure my family's future, that I had faced down men more powerful, more dangerous than they could ever hope to be. And I had won. Now, armed with the truth, I was ready to fight one more battle. Not just for the Sullivan fortune, but for Jackson, for my family, for everything I had built. And this time, I would make sure that when the dust settled, the Pierces would understand exactly who they had tried to deceive. Because no one threatens my family and walks away unscathed. Chapter 5. The revelation I've always believed that timing is everything. Know when to speak, when to act, and when to wait. The Pierces had played their hand, and now it was my turn. I called a family meeting, one that included not just Catherine and Jackson, but also our family lawyer, Howard Bradshaw, a man who had been with the Sullivan family for over 30 years. I had the footage from the nightclub ready, along with all the evidence the investigator had gathered. It was time for everyone to see the truth. Jackson arrived first, looking pale and drawn. The news of Amelia's divorce filing had hit him hard. His eyes were shadowed, his shoulders slumped with the weight of betrayal. "Grandma," he said, his voice hollow. "I don't understand what's happening." I reached out, placing my hand on his arm. "You will, Jackson." Soon, Catherine came in next, her face tight with worry. She had been avoiding me since our last argument, but the urgency in my voice when I called had convinced her to come. "Mom, what is this about?" she demanded, glancing nervously at Howard. "Why is Howard here?" "Sit down, Catherine," I said, gesturing to the leather chairs around the oak table in my study. "We have a lot to discuss." Howard nodded solemnly, setting his briefcase on the table and pulling out a stack of documents. "Mrs. Sullivan has asked me to review some concerning information regarding the Pierce family," he explained, his voice calm and professional. Catherine's eyes narrowed. "Mom, if this is just another attempt to—" "It's not," I cut her off. "This is about protecting our family, about the truth. Just watch." I played the nightclub footage first. The room fell silent as we watched Amelia, Ryan, and Gerald plotting together, weeks before Amelia had even met Jackson. I saw Catherine's face pale, her hand covering her mouth in shock. Jackson sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the screen, watching as the woman he loved revealed her true colors. When the footage ended, I turned to Howard, who began going through the financial records, the lawsuits, the evidence of the Pierces' desperate financial situation and their history of fraud. "They targeted us," I said quietly. "They saw the Sullivan fortune and decided it was their way out. Amelia was never in love with you, Jackson. This was a con from the beginning." Jackson's face hardened, his jaw clenching as he struggled to process the betrayal. She said she loved me." "And she lied," I replied, my heart breaking for him. "They all did." "What do we do now?" Catherine asked, her voice small, all her earlier defiance gone. She looked at me with new eyes, with respect, with the understanding that I had been right all along. Howard cleared his throat. Mrs. Sullivan has already taken some preliminary steps. We've filed a response to Amelia's divorce petition, including evidence of fraud and conspiracy. We're also pursuing criminal charges against Gerald for his involvement in Apex Investments, which appears to be nothing more than a shell company designed to funnel money from legitimate investors. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on Jackson. But there's more. The investigator found something else. Something I think you need to see. I pulled out another file, sliding it across the table to him. Inside were bank statements showing transfers from Apex Investments to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Accounts controlled by Gerald and, surprisingly, Ryan. They've been siphoning money, I explained. Not just yours, Jackson, but from other victims as well. This is a pattern for them, not a one-time scheme. Jackson's face crumpled, the last hope he might have been holding on to vanishing in an instant. I was such a fool, he whispered. I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. No, Jackson. You were trusting. There's a difference. They took advantage of your good heart, your willingness to see the best in people. That's not foolishness. That's decency. Catherine, who had been silent for some time, suddenly looked up, her eyes fierce. What can we do to stop them? She asked, and I heard the determination in her voice. The Sullivan determination that I had always known was there, buried beneath her defiance. We fight, I said simply. We show them exactly who they're dealing with. Howard nodded, pulling out more documents. We've already frozen all the accounts that Jackson opened with Gerald. We've also put a hold on any transactions related to the Sullivan Company shares that Amelia is trying to claim in the divorce. But that's just the beginning, I added, a small, hard smile forming on my lips. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with the FBI. The package we saw Ryan give to Gerald in that footage. We believe it may be related to another investigation they're conducting into money laundering through high-end nightclubs in Chicago. Catherine gasped. Money laundering? Yes, I confirmed. It seems our friend Ryan has been using his establishment for more than just serving overpriced cocktails. And Gerald was helping him. Jackson sat back, running his hands through his hair. I can't believe this. Believe it, I said firmly. But also believe this. They will not win. Not against us. Not against the Sullivans. After Howard left, the three of us remained in the study, the weight of the revelations hanging in the air. Catherine moved to sit beside Jackson, wrapping her arm around his shoulders in a rare display of maternal comfort. I'm sorry, Jackson, she said softly. I should have listened to Grandma. I should have seen it too. Jackson shook his head. How could you have known? I didn't even see it, and I was the one married to her. I watched them, feeling a bittersweet sense of pride. Despite everything, we were here together, a family united against a common enemy. We'll get through this, I assured them both. We always do. Later that night, after Catherine and Jackson had gone home, I sat alone in my study, staring out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. My phone rang. It was the investigator. Mrs. Sullivan, he said, his voice urgent. We've got a problem. The Pierces know we're onto them. They're planning to leave the country tomorrow. I felt a surge of anger, but not surprise. Of course they would run. It was what they had always done. Where are they going? I asked, already reaching for my phone to call Howard. Private jet to the Bahamas, then on to somewhere without an extradition treaty with the US. We're not sure of the final destination yet. I smiled grimly. They won't make it that far. Not this time. I made another call. Not to Howard, but to an old friend, a federal judge who owed me a favor from long ago. By midnight, I had what I needed. Emergency court orders freezing all of the Pierces' remaining assets and arrest warrants for Gerald and Ryan. Amelia would have to be handled differently. Her crime was against Jackson's heart, not the federal government. But I had plans for her too. As I finally headed to bed in the early hours of the morning, I felt a familiar fire burning in my chest. The same determination that had helped me build the Sullivan Empire from nothing. The same resolve that had seen me through every challenge life had thrown my way. The Pierces thought they had won, but their victory would be short-lived. Tomorrow would bring justice. Tomorrow would bring vindication. And tomorrow they would learn exactly who they had chosen to cross. Chapter 6. The reckoning dawn broke crisp and clear the day justice came for the Pierces. I watched from my car as federal agents surrounded Ryan's penthouse apartment, their movements precise and coordinated. Within minutes, They led him out in handcuffs, his face ashen with shock. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected me. Across town, a similar scene unfolded at Gerald's lakefront mansion. Jackson had insisted on being there, and I didn't stop him. Some lessons are best learned firsthand, and this was one Jackson needed to witness. Catherine went with him, standing by his side as her ex-father-in-law was escorted out, shouting protests that fell on deaf ears. But it was Amelia I wanted to see for myself. I found her at the Four Seasons, hastily packing designer clothes into expensive luggage. She jumped when I entered her suite, her eyes widening with surprise, then narrowing with contempt. "How did you get in here?" she demanded, her voice cold. "Money opens doors, Amelia," I replied calmly. "You should know that better than anyone." She straightened, tossing her golden hair over her shoulder with practiced elegance. Even now, in her moment of defeat, she was playing a role. "What do you want? Come to gloat." "Gloating would imply I take pleasure in this," I said, moving further into the room. "I don't. I take no joy in watching a young woman throw her life away on schemes and lies." Amelia laughed, a brittle sound that held no humour. "Save your lecture. My lawyer will have this sorted out in days." "You have nothing on me," I smiled sadly. "Is that what you think? That you're walking away from this?" I pulled out my phone, showing her pictures of Ryan and Gerald being arrested. "Your partners are already in custody, Amelia. The FBI has the nightclub footage, the financial records, everything." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her perfect features. Good. She needed to understand the gravity of what she had done. That's nothing to do with me," she stammered. "I just married Jackson. That's not a crime. Conspiracy to commit fraud is," I countered. "So is being an accessory to money laundering. And then there's the small matter of the prenuptial agreement you signed." Her face paled. "What about it?" "Section 12, paragraph 3, I recited from memory. "Any attempt to defraud the Sullivan family or obtain assets through deception voids all claims to marital property and triggers a penalty clause." I paused, watching the realization dawn on her. Howard Bradshaw is very thorough, you see. He's seen con artists try to marry into wealth before. Amelia's composure cracked. Her shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment I saw the real woman beneath the perfect facade. Scared, desperate, and alone. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To arrest me too?" I shook my head. "No. That's not up to me. I came to offer you a choice." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of choice?" "The kind that could change the course of your life," I said, taking a seat in the armchair by the window. "You can continue down this path, follow in your father's footsteps, run from your problems, and eventually end up exactly where he is now. Or you can start over." "Start over?" She laughed bitterly. "How am I supposed to do that?" "By telling the truth," I said simply. "All of it. Testify against Gerald and Ryan. Tell the authorities everything you know about their schemes, their victims, their methods. In exchange, the prosecutor is willing to consider immunity." Her eyes widened. You arranged this?" "I made a suggestion," I corrected. "What happens next is up to you." Amelia turned away, staring out the window at the city below. For a long moment she was silent, and I could almost see the wheels turning in her mind, weighing her options, calculating her chances. Finally, she turned back to me. "Why would you help me, after what I did to Jackson?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself many times over the past few days. The answer wasn't simple, but it was true. "Because I've lived long enough to know that people can change," I said quietly. "Because despite everything, I believe in second chances. And because Jackson loved you once, that has to count for something." Tears filled her eyes, real tears, not the calculated display of emotion I had seen from her before. "I never meant to hurt him," she whispered. "Not really. It was just supposed to be business." "Love isn't business, Amelia," I replied. "That was your first mistake." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "What do I need to do?" 6 months later, I stood on the terrace of Sullivan Manor watching as Jackson laughed with friends at his birthday celebration. The wounds were healing slowly but surely. The scandal had faded from the headlines, replaced by the next big story. Life, as it always does, had moved on. Gerald was serving 15 years for fraud, money laundering, and a host of other financial crimes. Ryan got 12. Their empire of lies had crumbled, leaving nothing but dust and regret in its wake. And Amelia? She had made her choice that day at the Four Seasons. Her testimony had been instrumental in bringing down not just Gerald and Ryan, but several other players in their network. True to my word, I had made sure she got her second chance. A fresh start in Seattle, far from Chicago and the wreckage of her former life. Catherine joined me on the terrace, handing me a glass of champagne. "Penny for your thoughts, Mum?" I smiled, taking the glass, just thinking about how far we've come. She nodded, following my gaze to Jackson. "He's doing better." I wasn't sure he would for a while. "He's a Sullivan," I said simply. "Resilience is in his blood." Catherine looked at me, her eyes soft with understanding. "You knew, didn't you?" "From the very beginning. You saw through them when none of us could." I sipped my champagne, considering her words. "I've spent a lifetime learning to recognize wolves in sheep's clothing, Catherine. It becomes instinct after a while." She reached out, taking my hand in hers. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I should have trusted your judgment." "And I could have been more patient," I admitted. "Less quick to condemn. We both made mistakes." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the sun began to set over the city I had helped build. The sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop for the end of this chapter in our lives. "Do you think we'll ever fully trust again?" Catherine asked softly. "After everything that happened?" I considered her question carefully. Trust was a fragile thing, easy to break, hard to rebuild. The Pierces had shattered our trust, not just in them, but in our own judgment. That kind of wound doesn't heal overnight. "I think," I said finally, "that trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something you offer carefully with eyes wide open. And sometimes the most valuable lesson is learning when to withhold it." Catherine nodded, understanding filling her eyes. "You taught us that lesson the hard way." "The best ones always are," I replied with a small smile. Below us, Jackson looked up, catching our eye. He raised his glass in a silent toast, his smile reaching his eyes for the first time in months. I raised mine in return, feeling a surge of pride and love for this young man who had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. The Pierces had thought they could take everything from us. Our money, our dignity, our trust. But they had failed. Because while fortunes can be stolen and hearts can be broken, there's one thing that can never be taken away: the bonds of family. And in the end, that's the only legacy that truly matters. Wow, what a story. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content.